My God, I hate drugs.
Dr. Rolando Borinaga, historian and secretary of the National Committee on Historical Research at the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Dr. Borinaga, thank you for joining us here in the studio.
Thank you.
Let's begin with this. Of course, everyone knows President Duterte said very specifically in his State of the Nation address last July 2017, give us back our bells. But even before that, meron nang gumagalaw sa U.S. Congress, correct? In early 2017. What was happening, sir?
So in the U.S. Congress at the time, around May or June, the House of Representatives, they have already fixed the idea that supposedly the 5-year prohibition for the return of veterans' memorial objects without a specification in law would lapse by September 30.
5-year prohibition. This is provided for in a law.
In a law
existing law
that was
already
passed in 2012. 2012. That was filed again by the Wyoming delegation to stall the return of the bells.
Yes, because
in time for the visit of President Aquino at the time. So although it is
Sir, sandali lang po. So Wyoming, because 2 of the 3 bells were in Wyoming.
Are in the state.
Just to remind the viewers.
Yes.
Okay.
So the provision would lapse September 30, 2017. But as early as March, the House of Representatives in the U.S. had already their draft said extend the provision by another 5 years.
From September 2017 up to
2022. But the Senate version was already silent about extending the prohibition. So without
in other
that,
words,
then it would lapse in
lang,
September 30.
Lapse on September 30.
So
if the return of what they call veteran memorial objects.
Yes.
Because that is how they describe anything that was taken for the Philippines during the Philippine-US War.
Yes.
Okay.
So would lapse. But there was a conflict between the Senate version and the House version. And so there was veterans were basically asked to write letters to their congressmen and senators to basically
allow the return.
Allow the lapse for the return of veterans' memorial objects. There was no mention about bells of Balangiga. Just allow, because
but the specific provision referring specifically and that's repetitive, refers specifically to the bells of Balangiga. So it was like an exception.
Parang it was just the veterans' memorial objects. But since that provision in the law was filed in around 1998, that became a law, it only applied to the bells of Balangiga on the representation of the
Senate.
Of the
so in other words,
senators and congressmen
dito sa
from
Pilipinas,
Wyoming.
meron po tayong bicameral conference committee. Yun ang nangyari. May House version ka, may Senate version. Ang House version dun sa Amerika i-extend natin 5 years hanggang 2022. Ang Senado naman ng Amerika, let it lapse on September 30, 2017. So ang sabi ng mga senador ng Amerika, kung gusto nyo yun, i-exempt natin ang bells ng Balangiga.
So that was now during the bicameral conference committee.
Okay. So we have that law, and that is what allows what happened today to happen today. All this while, of course, decades of hard work behind the scenes by so many other people.
Basically, 5 cycles, 4 failed campaigns, and a successful campaign that virtually started in 2013. Yung planning and
sir, you said the veterans. No, so you're talking about the U.S. veterans.
This was really now a U.S. veteran to U.S. veteran effort to educate veterans about what really happened.
And of course, the veterans of that war naturally are all deceased already.
Of course.
Pati yung mga heirs or descendants nila involved sa discussion.
On the American side, the daughter of the first soldier to be attacked in Balangiga is still alive, and she's my friend, and she favors the return of the bells. And so this gave a lot of push for the return because a daughter and relatives of other descendants
Yes. Were involved.
favor the return.
And then other U.S. veterans, meaning
Yes,
U.S. veterans of other wars,
Yes,
World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, etc.
Yes.
And it was interesting earlier, before we started the show, you were explaining that there was the U.S. veterans themselves were enlightened as to the history behind the bells, which will explain why there should have been only one bell that should have been, if we follow their description of what a veteran memorial object is, only one bell should have been taken with them.
Yes, because the two others were not rung during the attack.
Okay, the
Only
two
one
others, which were in Wyoming.
Yeah,
in that
the
US base
ones in Wyoming, yes.
So it was the bell in South Korea that was rung during the attack.
That was the signal bell.
The signal bell.
But it was rung after the attack has started, not.
Okay. And that convinced the veterans, the U.S. veterans.
Well, at least that was part of the education process that finally convinced them about what really happened. And it helped in the campaign for the return of the bells. Enlightenment, education, information dissemination, and enlightenment.
Sir, earlier in the special edition at 6 p.m. we were talking to you on the phone, and we talked about other church bells that were taken from Philippine churches by U.S. forces during the U.S.-Philippine War. So we are aware, and that bell had already been returned in May 2016, the bell in Bawang in La Union.
Bell in Bawang.
But you were saying that, Bawang. But you were saying that there are two bells in West Point that are Philippine church bells, but it isn't clear kung saan sila nanggaling.
Yes, because photos of this were in fact sent to me for basically trying to decipher where these bells came from. Only the one in Wyoming for Bawang La Union had enough information that could incontestably establish that the bell came from.
That bell from Bawang La Union was brought to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. There are two other bells also at West Point.
Yes, in their museum. They are willing to return it, but
they just don't know where.
They
so you mean there was no record whatsoever when those? But did they tell Philippine authorities or you what year those bells were brought there to the museum at West Point?
Not much information. It's just these bells were taken to the U.S. and then donated to the museum.
Okay, so why don't they just return it to the Philippine government? Because there are also there is
hindi mahanap yung origin kung saan.
Hindi, but to return lang to the Philippine government para nasa National Museum or some. Or is the law, does the law apply to them, to those bells also?
Hindi, no. The law does not apply to them. But so for instance, if my opinion is asked, kung wala yung owner, then it's very hard. They might as well keep it for the meantime.
Okay. So and finally, sir, like you were explaining earlier, there are other church bells. We're just not aware yet as to where they are. Right?
Hopefully, this can create a momentum for the return of heritage objects taken from the Philippines during the Philippines. Not only church bells, but any other objects with heritage values. So for instance, there is an aguinaldo table at West Point.
Aguinaldo table. Use it as what? His dining table? His desk?
Well, it looked like yung anting-anting table ni Aguinaldo noon na that was captured by U.S. forces. My theory is that in Lubuagan, somewhere in the mountain of Abra at the time, but but it's now Kalinga.
Okay.
It was taken to West Point. They are also willing to return that, but I'm still trying to document.
Okay. Well, there is an Aguinaldo Museum in Baguio.
Whatever. But the plan is to have that table returned. Hopefully in time for the 150th birthday of Aguinaldo next year. And the campaigners for this return of the bells are willing to extend help for that.
Sila rin. Dennis Wright.
Yes, Dennis
Retired
Wright,
US Navy.
McKinnon, and
Okay, well, this is great. Well, it was a good day today for Philippine history and for Filipino heritage. Sir, Dr. Rolando Borinagat, sir, thank you very much for a moment. Now part of history, the Balanghiga bells are finally back in the country after more than a century since they were taken by American soldiers as war booty. The United States says returning the bells is just the right thing to do. Our senior correspondent, David Santos, tells us more.
On board a C-130 plane that carried the emblem of a U.S. general familiar to many Filipinos, the Balanghiga bells, just like Douglas MacArthur during the Japanese occupation, they have returned. Americans seized them as war booty, and more than a century since then, the bells are a step closer to where they should belong. For most descendants of the Balanghiga uprising in 1901, seeing the bells up close and personal for the first time is a moving experience.
It is a very emotional journey, and I always cry every time.
Dolores Matias is a great-granddaughter of Pedro Abayan, then Balanghiga's El Presidente del Pueblo or town mayor, and among those who led the attack against the American forces.
And those peaceful town people took part in that very gruesome rebellion. I even couldn't believe that my grandfather, who was a very religious man, could be there, could wield a bolo, and maybe took a life.
The negotiation for the bells' return took about half a century. President Duterte has been vocal about his anti-U.S. sentiments and demanded last year that Washington give back the bells. And so it did. The U.S. passed a law this year clearing legal obstacles for the bells' return. Then the Trump administration facilitated it, despite some opposition.
I don't see any real opposition to the return of the bells, and I think, there were just some people making a lot of noise.
U.S. officials, however, insist things fell into place to have the bells returned, and it was just the right thing to do.
It's really much more than just one president or one request or one demand. I mean, this is something that many people have worked on for a very long time.
This is a gesture that we hope is viewed positively as an investment in this relationship in our alliance.
Historians say both the Philippines and U.S. have emotional attachment to the bells. These have many symbolisms representing each country's struggle and interests.
It is our hope that they will no longer remind us of that painful episode of our joint history. Instead, let them serve as a memorial to those soldiers who fought valiantly for their country.
Before these are transported to Samar, the public can view the Balanghiga bells at the Air Force Museum here inside the Villamor Air Base. David Santos, CNN Philippines.